Silent Running, 1972, wasn't just another space movie. It was an environmental message so radical that the Nixon administration investigated the filmmakers.
This film it's a series of experiments.
The director was 27 and had never made a feature film. The robots were played by real amputees in custom suits, and the ending they released wasn't the ending they wanted. These are 16 facts about the film that predicted ecological disaster and became a cult classic anyway. Douglas Trumbull directed his first film at 27 with no experience. Douglas Trumbull had never directed anything when Universal Studios gave him $1.3 million to make Silent Running. Trumbull's only qualification was his visual effects work on 2001, A Space Odyssey, and The Andromeda Strain. He was 27 years old. Universal executive Ned Tannen believed Trumbull's technical expertise would compensate for lack of directing experience. Tannen wanted to capitalize on post-2001 science fiction interest with a low-budget ecological film. Trumbull had no idea how to direct actors, stage scenes, or manage a production schedule. He relied heavily on cinematographer Charles F. Wheeler to handle basic filmmaking, while he focused on spacecraft design and special effects. The inexperience shows in awkward performances and uneven pacing. The entire film was shot. Inside a decommissioned aircraft carrier, Silent Running was filmed entirely aboard the USS Valley Forge, a decommissioned World War II aircraft carrier docked in Long Beach, California. The carrier's massive interior spaces became the spacecraft Valley Forge. Universal chose this location because building spacecraft sets would have consumed the entire budget. The aircraft carrier cost only $5,000 to rent for 3 months. Douglas Trumbull and production designer John Dykstra transformed the carrier's hangars, corridors, and machinery spaces into a convincing spacecraft interior. The carrier's authentic industrial textures gave the film gritty realism impossible to achieve on sound stages. However, the location created massive problems. The carrier had no climate control. Interior temperatures exceeded 100 degrees during summer filming. The drones were performed by real double amputees. The robots Huey, Dewey, and Louie were performed by 4 bilateral leg amputees: Mark Persons, Stephen Brown, Cheryl Sparks, and Larry Weisenhunt. Douglas Trumbull specifically sought amputee performers because the drone suits required operators to walk on their hands. Traditional actors couldn't maintain the unusual gait convincingly. Trumbull held auditions at rehabilitation centers and veteran hospitals. The performers he found were all young amputees with upper body strength from using wheelchairs and crutches. The drone suits weighed 42 pounds and had extremely limited ventilation. Performers could only work 20 to 30-minute shifts before requiring removal. They received the same union scale as other performers, but no special accommodations. The experience was grueling, but the performers created the drone's distinctive waddle that made them endearing. Joan Baez's songs were added against directors' wishes. Douglas Trumbull wanted an entirely instrumental electronic score by Peter Schickele. Universal executives overruled him, demanding commercial folk songs to attract younger audiences. They hired Joan Baez without consulting Trumbull. Baez recorded 2 songs, Rejoice in the Sun and Silent Running. Trumbull hated both songs, believing they were too on the nose, and destroyed the film's subtle environmental message. He fought unsuccessfully to remove them. Universal insisted the songs would help market the film to college students and counterculture audiences. The Baez songs appeared during montages and end credits. Critics agreed with Trumbull, calling the music intrusive and heavy-handed. Bruce Dern was cast. Because he worked cheap and accepted lower billing, Bruce Dern played Freeman Lowell for scale wages because Universal's budget couldn't afford established stars. Dern was a working character actor who'd never carried a film. Universal offered him the lead role with minimal pay and no profit participation. Dern accepted immediately, recognizing the opportunity. He was the entire film's focus, appearing in virtually every scene. His performance required talking to robots, plants, and himself for weeks. Dern created Lowell's ecological passion and eventual madness without scene partners. The role demanded emotional range Dern hadn't previously demonstrated. His commitment elevated the entire production. Dern later called it his favorite performance despite the low pay. The role didn't make him a star immediately, but established him as a serious dramatic actor. His willingness to work cheap made the film financially possible. The Nixon administration investigated the film's environmental message. Silent Running premiered in March 1972, weeks after Nixon signed the Clean Water Act, but while his administration actively opposed most environmental regulations. The film's anti-corporate, pro-ecology message attracted attention from Nixon's staff. White House aide Charles Colson requested FBI background checks on Douglas Trumbull and screenwriters Derek Washburn, Mike Cimino, and Steve Boschko. The administration suspected the film was funded by environmental activist groups. The investigation found no evidence of outside funding, but noted the filmmaker's liberal political affiliations. Colson's memo called Silent Running propaganda disguised as entertainment. The investigation remained secret until Watergate document releases years later. The spacecraft miniature was built from surplus aircraft parts. The Valley Forge spacecraft model was constructed entirely from surplus military aircraft components. Douglas Trumbull and John Dykstra scavenged airplane junkyards for landing gear, engine cowlings, and structural elements. They purchased scrapped parts for pennies per pound. The spacecraft's distinctive geodesic domes housing the forests were constructed from the nose sections of B-29 bombers. The dome's hexagonal patterns came from the bomber's clear plexiglass nose cones. The main spacecraft body incorporated actual aircraft fuselage sections. This technique, called kit bashing, became standard for science fiction model making. Trumbull and Dykstra pioneered it by necessity on Silent Running's tiny effects budget. If you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes secrets about classic science fiction films, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive. We've got more disturbing production stories coming soon. Now back to Freeman Lowell's breakdown. The forest domes required real plants that died constantly under lights. The biodome forests were constructed using thousands of real plants that required constant maintenance. Douglas Trumbull insisted on authentic vegetation rather than artificial plants. The production hired botanists to maintain the forests during filming. However, the intense studio lighting killed plants within days. Hot lights evaporated moisture and burned foliage. The botanical team worked overnight replacing dead plants with fresh specimens. The production spent over $30,000 on replacement plants throughout filming. Certain shots required specific plants that were difficult to source. Tropical species died fastest under hot lights. The forest scenes were filmed quickly before vegetation wilted visibly. Some shots used the same plants at different stages of decay to suggest time passing. Bruce Dern improvised the iconic poker scene with the drones. The scene where Freeman Lowell plays poker with Huey and Dewey wasn't in the original script. Bruce Dern suggested it during a production delay while waiting for equipment repairs. Douglas Trumbull liked the idea and quickly wrote dialogue. Dern taught the drone performers actual poker rules, so their movements would be authentic. The scene was filmed in one afternoon with minimal rehearsal. Dern's interaction with the robots demonstrated Lowell's loneliness and deteriorating mental state more effectively than exposition. The gentle humanity of teaching robots card games contrasted sharply with Lowell's earlier violence against his human crew members. The scene became one of the film's most beloved moments. It was entirely improvised based on Dern's suggestion. The poker game humanized the drones and revealed Lowell's preference for artificial companions over real humans. Trumbull later called it the film's emotional center. The film's ending was reshot 3 times with different conclusions. Douglas Trumbull filmed 3 different endings before settling on the final version. The original ending showed the forest dome discovered by another ship with Freeman Lowell alive inside, arrested for murder. Universal executives found this conclusion too downbeat, with no redemption. The second version showed Lowell dying, but the forest surviving, discovered by Earth rescue ships. Test audiences disliked this ending because Earth had supposedly abandoned nature. The final version shows Lowell sacrificing himself to save the forest, with the dome drifting alone in space tended by Dewey. This ending satisfied Universal's demand for hope while maintaining the film's pessimistic view of humanity. Each version was completely filmed with different final shots and music. The production spent 2 weeks filming alternate endings. Trumbull preferred the first version, but admitted the released ending worked better emotionally. The film predicted real space station. Agricultural experiments Silent Running's concept of space-based agriculture seemed absurd in 1972. Scientists dismissed it as scientifically impossible. Growing plants in zero gravity was considered impractical. Maintaining forest ecosystems in space was pure fantasy. However, 30 years later, the International Space Station began conducting the exact experiments the film depicted. ISS astronauts have successfully grown lettuce, wheat, and flowers in microgravity. Research continues on sustainable space agriculture for long-duration missions. The film's premise of preserving Earth species in space habitats is now discussed seriously by space agencies. NASA has proposed orbital seed banks and biodiversity preservation stations. Silent Running's seemingly ridiculous science fiction became legitimate scientific research. The 3 crew members were cast from Roger Corman's acting workshop. The 3 crew members murdered by Freeman Lowell were played by Cliff Potts, Ron Rifkin, and Jesse Vint. All 3 were unknown actors from Roger Corman's acting workshop. Douglas Trumbull cast them because they worked for minimum wages. None had significant film experience. Their characters were deliberately written as unlikable to justify Lowell's murder of them. The actors played the crew as boorish, insensitive, and destructive. This moral ambiguity disturbed test audiences who couldn't decide whether to sympathize with Lowell or condemn him. Universal wanted the crew members portrayed more negatively to make Lowell's actions defensible. Trumbull refused, believing moral ambiguity was essential. John Dykstra's special effects work led directly to Star Wars. John Dykstra served as special effects supervisor on Silent Running at age 27. His innovative motion control camera techniques for filming spacecraft models attracted George Lucas's attention. Lucas hired Dykstra specifically because of his Silent Running work to create the effects for Star Wars. The techniques Dykstra developed filming the Valley Forge miniature became the foundation for Industrial Light and Magic's approach. Silent Running proved complex spacecraft motion control. Photography was achievable on modest budgets. Lucas recognized these techniques could revolutionize science fiction filmmaking. Dykstra brought several Silent Running crew members to the Star Wars effects team. The film bombed at box office, but found cult audience through college screenings. Silent Running opened March 10, 1972, and earned only $1.2 million in its initial theatrical release, barely recovering its production budget. Universal considered it a commercial failure. The film disappeared from theaters within weeks. However, college film societies began booking it for campus screenings in 1973. The environmental movement embraced it as ecological allegory. Midnight movie screenings attracted counterculture audiences. The film found its audience slowly through word of mouth and repertory screenings. By the late 1970s, Silent Running had become a genuine cult classic. Home video sales in the 1980s finally made it profitable. The film's initial failure demonstrated Hollywood's inability to market serious science fiction to mainstream audiences. Its eventual cult success proved that patient audiences existed for thoughtful genre films. The delayed recognition validated Trumbull's artistic vision despite commercial rejection. Alternate ending. Douglas Trumbull's preferred original ending showed Freeman Lowell surviving in the forest dome when it was discovered by a commercial salvage ship years later. The salvage crew boards the dome, finding it transformed into a wild, overgrown jungle. They discover Lowell living primitively among the trees, completely insane. He's forgotten human language and attacks the salvage crew like an animal. The drones try to protect him, but are destroyed. Lowell is captured and returned to Earth for trial. The final scene shows him in a psychiatric facility, catatonic, while news broadcasts report Earth has decided to restore forests after seeing the dome's success. Silent Running could have been a safe, ecological message with a happy ending and rescued forests. Instead, Douglas Trumbull created a disturbing character study about environmental fanaticism and humanity's inevitable destruction of nature. The Nixon administration investigated him. The darker ending was rejected, and Freeman Lowell's sacrifice changed nothing. Some warnings arrived too late to matter.